Properties. Hello. What about now? Yes, I was testing the sound. Thanks, Niels. Can you guys hear me fine now? Double checking, so it should be working now. Okay, thanks. Yeah, there was something wrong in the OBS settings here. So, good afternoon then. So I'm Eric, one of the original developers of Quantum back 7 years ago, and still part of the core team, but there's a lot more people now working on it. So um, please all be welcome. And today the topic is, as was showing up, it's a Q&A about Quantum 3 and how to develop multiplayer games. The context is, let's say, publishing games for the web, WebGL, and why Quantum is the best option for this, and so on. I have an interesting project open here, so let me switch the scene here, that I can demonstrate some stuff and we can play around to see what you can do, and I have a few different scenes to show some stuff from scratch like this one here, or just show some stuff we already have working that you guys can ask questions about. So, but because this is a Q&A, I would be happy to start with questions from the audience right away. And of course, I can also talk a little bit about Quantum to begin with. So Quantum is a game engine. So Quantum is not really, let's say, a netcode SDK that you add to your project after you start. You already have a game running, right? So this is an interesting thing maybe to start with, which is whenever people come to us and ask, how do I add multiplayer to my game? The correct and technical answer to that is that you do not really add multiplayer to a game. You develop a multiplayer game where single player is an option. That's how the best multiplayer games are done. It's I'm not saying that you cannot do that. Of course, you can add multiplayer to an existing game, but normally the results are not the best. It's fine, for example, to prototype a game in single player and then come and develop it into multiplayer. But normally, the best way to do that is start over and do it properly with multiplayer. And Quantum kind of takes that to the extreme because it is a game engine in itself, and you cannot just add it to an existing project and one thing at a time at it. So the first thing to understand is that Quantum is a game engine. You build the game in Quantum, and then you see that multiplayer comes out of the box. And when I mean multiplayer, is like multiple different variations of multiplayer. So Quantum works with only one player locally. You're not even connected online. You can play it fine locally. It works with 2, 4, 60, how many, if you want to do a couch co-op game mode, it also works out of the box. It's fully supported. But it also works with the same code base to run online, PvP, PvE, whatever you want, multiple players playing the same game. And you can mix and match. You can have multiple players playing from one. Let's say you have a Nintendo Switch with 2 people on different joypads playing against another person on a mobile phone against someone else on a WebGL build, and you can have a couple of people just spectating the game, not even putting input. So all these modes are supported and they come out of the box. But because we have a couple of questions, let me check the questions here and see what I can answer, and I can show live code. We can modify stuff here and play around with it. Let me take a look here. Good question, Niels. So I'm gonna repeat the question here for those not reading the comments. So, are system updates called in any specific order? If the answer is yes, is the order the one in system setup user, and are they called after core systems? So here's the answer: yes. Systems are called in one specific order. the order is defined by you. It can be defined on system setup user. Let me show what that means so people can see. So on the simulation code, there's this thing called system setup, and here you can add your own systems. So when you add systems here, like this example here, so systems add my system, what you're doing is you are appending to the list of systems. So if you're using this, you are actually putting them to run after the predefined core systems. But you could technically actually reset these and create the whole, so you can clear this list, store it temporarily somewhere, and create your own list and insert yours in any order. But in the end, the point is that this is the old API. You do not need to use this API anymore, because in Quantum 3, we actually have this thing called system config, which is a Quantum asset that comes with the SDK that allows you to define the systems you want to run in any game. Let me just get the default version of that visually here. So basically, it's an asset with an array of systems, and you can define all the systems you want to run here. And in this example here, so this is a core system that does prediction culling. This is a system I created that I wanted to run before physics. So I wanted to move my platforms before the physics engine, so I added a system here before it. Then we have some more core systems that you can disable the ones you don't want. And then I added another custom system by me at the end. So editing here, I think it's nicer, it's easier. But you can, of course, do the same here via code. And basically, when this is called, you get this already with the ones predefined, and you also have them defined here if you want to recreate the list. So it's your choice to use either via this API or that. So essentially, we get that asset. That asset is used to create this, and then this is called the order. The final order is whatever is the end result after this is called here. So I'm gonna. So Jacob has a question about system main thread group. Let's answer that one. I'm gonna just take a look at if the other one is also related. Input from Unity. I'm gonna check that next. So let's start with Jacob's question. So can I explain about system main thread group and talk about game related example where it might make sense? So so system groups are totally optional, and the reason to use them is because of one specific thing. So let me see if I remove as many systems as I can so I simplify some stuff. So please ignore the logic here. I just want to show something. Ignore what I'm doing. I just want to show one particular thing. So you can disable systems via a type or via, I think there is another syntax sugar here for, it's always with type. Oh, we can pass the specific system, yeah. But normally we disable via type with a generic code like this. So let's say KCC system, something like that. So I'm not gonna do it here, of course, but you could one interesting example is you are doing gameplay and you don't want to have character movement, spawning, bots, navigation, physics. You don't want any of that running, for example, if you want to do your character selection to happen in game. So Quantum is already running, it's spinning, but you have, let's say, 30 seconds to select a character. Maybe you have some specific rules about which characters can be selected in which order on the different teams. We strongly recommend you to do that inside gameplay implementation in the engine itself. So it's a good kind of, it's a common kind of pattern that you, from on init, you have kind of like one main manager system that this defines which systems should be running or not. Notice that that also matches the fact that you can start systems already pre-disabled if you want to, but I personally like to do that via code. So I go here and I have on and on it, I would say it's better to put override. Let's say I have a manager system, and from on it in it I'm going to do this. So to answer Jacob's question, the most important use of main thread of main system group is that you can disable multiple systems in one line of code. It's essentially that. So pretty much you can say you don't have you do not need to forget that you're disabling. So you say you create a group and you call it gameplay systems group, and then when you define, it can be even either via code or here you can have children of systems. So if you create a system and you call it, for example, gameplay systems, and you put all your gameplay systems in the order you want in there, then disabling the group system, the composition group system, would disable all of them in one shot. So the only thing that system group adds is the ability to, in one call, disable the whole group. There's nothing else to it. So honestly, it's something I personally don't use them much. It's something we added a long time ago, but I personally don't use much. If you see a value in doing this, it's fine. In my opinion, it's not extremely necessary. We normally don't remove things when they're useful, so it's been there for a while. It fully works. We actually made it everything composable now, but it is very seldom used. I know some customs use it. I hope this answers your question. I didn't add a lot of code here, but it's actually the purpose for that. So let me just take another quick look here. Input from Unity seems to have attached whatever is reading the input to my player entity, which is not how the doc says it should be. I mentioned this on Discord. So Wayfarer Games. So the question is, when you're doing input polling, which is because for everyone here, so let me just get, oh, damn, this is a zip file. So I define, for example, the quantum input here in this example with just buttons. And that is what the quantum input is going to use. And then I have here, I get the input from the player. I'm adding I'm setting the input into a copy of the input struct into the KCC in this particular example, because I have something interesting that I can clone an entity and run it again and so on. So it's kind of a weird thing I did, kind of like Super Meat Boy style. But this is the quantum input, right? So writing gameplay, you're only doing this. But your question is about the input polling on Unity. So when you input poll, just send input on behalf of your local player. The answer is no, you do not have at all to have it attached to your entity. So if you see in all the examples, in all the samples, the input is actually a game object that already exists in the gameplay scene. It's just a regular Unity mono behavior that you use it to subscribe to the quantum input local input poller. So you use this line here that comes with the SDK as an example, which is quantum callback subscribe to the type of callback called poll inputs, and it's a method on this script. This script here is not attached to the entity. What it's doing in this case, so this is for a command, so it's not necessary to look at it. So let's look at the other one. So this is the actual input here. So what I'm doing is poll input is called for every new tick. So then this is going to be called only for the local player. If your client, if you have 8 players in the game, but this particular machine, this game client controls only one player, this is going to be called once per tick, and only that, once per tick. If it's 30 hertz simulation, it's going to be called 30 times per second. Create a new quantum input, assign the values you want for the buttons. Always assign based on the current state of whatever is the Unity input stuff you have. Never use something like, oh, I have a Unity get button down, get button up. Forget about those. Always get, what is the current status? Is the person pressing the button or not? Send that as the quantum input. If it's an axis, what is the value of the axis now? Send that. Disable acceleration, all those kind of things on Unity inputs. It doesn't matter which input framework you're using. It doesn't matter if it's the new, the old, or a third party like a Rewired, which is great as well. Just think about the quantum as a virtual input controller. Just copy whatever it is from your input mapper stuff. What is the current state? Copy that into the input. Let me see if you have a follow-up stuff before I move to the next one. Yeah, you don't have to have it attached to the player entity at all. It's not, it has nothing to do with the player entity. If anything, if you add this script to a player entity, you would actually try to register multiple instances of this because you're going to have a view for multiple things. And no, this doesn't make any sense. Honestly, it doesn't make any sense. This never happened. We don't have any other report of that. And I would not recommend you to attach input polar callback to the entity that belongs to the local player, with one exception. Sorry, this is not the case. We cannot, unless you have a clean repro case, I wouldn't have to move on, because it's not necessary. All the demos, everything that comes with the SDK demonstrates it without it. The only case you only would like to have the input polar being part of an entity is if you have relative input stuff. And honestly, I would do that from the camera perspective sometimes, and not. I would attach the input to the camera game object, not even to the player in that case, because you may want to have something like, for example, you want to send up to Quantum, send as input the world space direction of the movement, but the world space direction depends on the perspective of the camera. So you may want to convert that and then send the world space direction. In that case, you could think about attaching the inputs to a different, either the entity or the camera, but what you're describing, no, it's not a quantum bug. It cannot be. I'm sorry, I'm going to move to the next question, because this code here literally does what I'm saying, and it doesn't need to be on the entity. So this, I'll just run it here. So let me show. The input script is here. It's not related to the player. I press play. I'm controlling my character. This comes in every single demo, so it cannot be that. I think it can be something else in the way you were putting the inputs from Unity. You're reading the data from Unity. I don't know, but log that the polar is actually being called. I'm gonna move to the next question, because if you have a repro case, you can send us a clean repro case. We can, of course, take a look at it. We can do it over the Discord channel later. But I have to move over to the next question. So Roberto Martinez, I think what is already sent. So Yes, Quantum is absolutely free to develop with, and you can also release games for up to 100 CCU for free. You just download everything from photonengine.com. You just go to Quantum. You can either get directly the SDK here, there is a intro tutorial, but if you're coming um, from the WebGL perspective, like Crazy Games Jam Discord, we have a new. So where is the new? This Crazy Games Starter WebGL sample that shows you also some best practices for WebGL, and this one in particular is done with Unity 6 and all that, so you can just try this one, for example. But I would recommend you to always start with the main tutorials. Let me check Got's question. In ECS, it can be easy to end up with splitting the entity into multiple very specialized components and have a system for each component. Is there a limited recommendation system number in Quantum? So that's a very good question, Got. So here's the question. Should we go for very small components that are very specialized, or kind of like bigger components that do multiple stuff? So in archetype components, is more recommended that you have tiny components and highly specialized systems. On a sparse-set ECS, that's not strictly necessary, although it is still fine. But because systems are going to run in sequence, and if you're basically you have the overhead of basically filtering all the entities that match a certain filter. And so I'll give an example that if you have 32 players and you have 32 entities representing these players, and they have multiple components in them and so on, but you're going to have multiple of these components doing very simple logic for each one of them. And if you add, let's say, 10 different systems all traversing all 32 entities, you are basically traversing each one of the 32 entities in sequence, so 320 times touching entities in a block. And yeah, the logic you are doing for each one is different, so in the end you can think, oh, the total logic I'm doing is the same. It doesn't matter if I do one single filter that does all 10 different logics with if else here and there, versus 10 different systems just doing the 32 times tiny logic. The problem is that when you add multiple systems, just the traversal of the entities and setting the pointers and all that creates a little bit of an overhead. And it is in many cases better to have slightly beefier components that you traverse in one shot instead of traversing multiple times. So you do not need to go for tiny components. So you can have a slightly beefier component doing this, do if else, do polymorphism with assets. So although we don't have, I think we do have a limit on the size, on the number of systems, because in the end we have the disabled system. This is a bitmap, but I don't remember how big it is because I don't remember any customer ever reaching this particular limit. But I would never use more than a couple of dozen systems, perhaps 30 sometimes. If you have a very, very complex game, I don't see a reason to go for too many systems in a sparse-set ECS like this. So I hope this answers your question. Let me see if I have more. So Niels has a question here. Can a simulation run in 30 Hz on the server and 60 Hz in the local simulation? If so, the server misses an input. Blah. So Niels, you have multiple questions in one question here. So let me try to answer all of them. So can a simulation running 30 Hz on the server and 60 Hz on the... So let me first explain something here. So Quantum is a deterministic engine. It does not run the simulation on our server. It is running a deterministic simulation in every single one of the clients. What our server does, it ensures that the input stream and the timing of the ticking is controlled by the server. So if I'm playing the game, my game client must run the game at the expected time rate that is enforced by the server. Otherwise, I cannot just, let's say, keep sending my input and it would take too long to get to the server. If that happens, the server is basically going to ignore my input and allow and keep a steady stream of input going through every other player. That is pretty much the principle why Quantum works for more than 2 players. If you think about like old school primitive deterministic predict rollback netcode technology like GGPO, that only works for 1v1 games. You have rifting and all sorts of issues. So if you want to have more than 2 players, you must have a server that controls the input stream and all that. So that's what Quantum is all about, besides being the game engine itself. So so the server is not really running the simulation. Can the server run the simulation? Yes, that's an optional thing that very, very successful games sometimes do to, let's say, push the game results from the server and not from multiple clients to match if they all have the same and all that. So we can do it, but it is optional. So normally you are not running anything on the server except the input stuff. But then, so the server simulation is, you define a rate you want the simulation to run. It's part of the deterministic config. And that is what the simulation is going to run on all devices. But that is not related to the rendering rate. Is not related to the rendering rate at which Unity is running. So it's a bit like, if you think about Unity, you have physics. So physics is running at 50 Hertz, but you may be rendering the game at 60 Hertz. You don't have to do much about it. It's the fixed update. It's running 50 times per second. Sometimes on one Unity update, you have no calls to fix update. Sometimes you have 2 calls to fix update. Sometimes you have 1 call. So Quantum updates work like that. So about inputs, so is it possible to miss an input between, if you press an input between 2 different input calls? So first, let me tell you, it's very, very hard for a player to press and depress. So you have to press and depress the button in between 2 polling of a frame. So you have to do that very quickly. So even running at 30 Hertz simulation, using this approach I'm doing here. So let me show the code for the input itself. I'm going to isolate one example because I was doing this here for 2 players. So you can kind of ignore this here. Let me try to comment this, and I'll just say jump, or I'll just use this here because I set this for two player couch as well. So I have multiple local players in each machine. Let's do this here. I have 1 jump there. So pay attention here that I'm using get button and not get button down. Never use get button down from this polar. You use the current state. So I would say that at 30 Hertz is very difficult for you to press a button and release it within 1 frame. But even if you do, there is a way to guarantee it happens. So you can do something, okay, you're running super fast at hardware, you can do something like bool jump pressed. You can say something like equals false. And then you can say if, jump pressed. You do say jump pressed equals this. And then when you poll, you can do this and set jump pressed to false. So next time Unity gets called, you poll it again, and so on and so forth. So, or you can even use an or here to guarantee that this is not called before it. So you do something like, you can even do something like this if you want to ensure that this, so you'd never miss one. It would, but using this, you could also use something like an event on Unity to set this if the button is ever first pressed, and then on depressed you want it to be for the jump you want to poll it at least once, but sometimes for the movement you may want it to be the current state. So it really depends on each case, but the point is, as long as you send the state you think it should be now, it should be fine. Just don't use get button down, because that's only valid for one frame. And actually, you should always send the current state and let the deep pressing and pressing be computed by Quantum, because that works really well on the prediction, and we have the button framework already doing that for you. So you don't have to write specific code. Just do get button. And you may ask, oh, but Unity already does that. Yeah, but that only works in local. That does not work in multiplayer. To do it in multiplayer, you keep sending the state, because we send with some reliability, we send with some redundancy, and then we kind of guarantee it to happen. And you will not depress the button accidentally on prediction of other player inputs and so on. So the pattern is always send the current state, and on the simulation code you can use something like I'll just use an example here. So I grab the input. You can do something like inputs, then for example jump DAW. You see that you have is currently down, you have was pressed on this frame or was released on this frame. So you can always use the state machine that we compute for you. This one is very, very steady, very stable under lossy network conditions, and even if one input is missed in between and the server has to replace your input for one frame, it will use the input from the previous frame, so it does not create accidental gaps. That is very, very important. It just repeats your previous input, and that is a very good thing to avoid, let's say, gaps, accidental gaps due to network loss. So use the framework to your advantage, and that is the best option. So let me see if we have more. Points. Let me see what else I have here. I'll take a look at these separately. So we have a few. So what was the input issue in the end? So I see that it's now working. I don't know. I'll read it later. So running the simulation as multiplayer in editor gives an error. I don't know what the error is. So you have a region. Why can't I? Oh damn! I'm struggling with this scrolling here on. Let me see if I can see the questions somewhere else. Yeah, that's better. So. So this ping issue, I think, is it WebGL? I don't know, region ping coroutine. So is this a WebGL build? I am not really sure where this comes from. So if I run mine here in multiplayer, which is just the SDK, let me see if I get the. So this is already doing the region. Oh, okay. I don't have an app ID set here. I would have to set an app ID to test that. Sorry. Wayfarer Games, can you state where you're coming from? Are you coming from our Discord or from the Crazy Games Jam Discord server. We can follow up on this exception you're having in one of the Discord servers later. That you are running at 300 plus milliseconds ping means you are connecting to a region that's too far from your where you are. So try to connect to a region that's closer. Let me see what Jacob asked here. Oh, so many things. Okay, here. In general, okay. Okay. If I want to manage multiple abilities with the same base behavior, I cannot have multiple identical components on the same entity and iterate through them. What design advice you have? Okay, so like examples, polymorphism with assets union for runtime data set abilities and structure and use inventory component but abilities in an array. That is normally. Oh, so you were the thief. Oh, let's follow up on. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you from the name. I think you said it on Discord and I didn't recognize. Let's check this one later because it doesn't click to me why it is saying unsecure. If we're using our menu, it allows you to go here and select the region. If we're not using our menu, when you connect, when you call for the first time for the load balancing client to .connect, you have a few parameters you can pass. I think it's on the matchmaking arguments. Region is one of them. It's a string with the region encoded EU, SA, and so on. So try that. It's on the connect with settings. There is also the option connect with settings. You can create a settings struct, and one of the parameters in the settings is the region. So set the region, you will guarantee to connect to that region. Try to see one that's closer to you. So got questions. So that's a very good one, got. So my normal approach is to do that. It's to so there are two different aspects of your question. So I'll repeat the question here so others can actually look at it, and then we can do some code perhaps to demonstrate. So the question is, I want to manage multiple abilities with the same base behavior. So first answer that came to me is using asset polymorphism. For people who are not used to what asset polymorphism can do, let me just very quickly show an example here. So say you are running something like an ability system and you want to have, sorry, not here. So let's demonstrate here. I want to create a new asset script. I'm going to call it abilities. Ability. I hope this name is not going to clash anywhere. So I'm going to do something like I have my ability here. This ability it's an asset, and then I'm going to create a method here, public void update ability, and this must receive frame f. Then perhaps we should receive the entity ref, entity where this ability is part of, and we'll add a few more things later here. But let's make this public virtual void, and this is the base version of ability. So then you may want to do, so that allows you to create. So when you go here, quantum asset, you can create something called ability, and you have this ability, but you don't have anything in this new ability. So let's do something more useful here. I'm going to delete it here. So I'm going to create another asset script. I'm going to call it special ability, and then this guy is going to inherit ability, and it's going to override update ability. So that's the base. Roberto Martinez, yes, works 2D, 3D, doesn't matter. I'm going to show you some stuff after I finish this this kind of long one here. So this ability inherits this one, and so the cool stuff here is if I add to, let's say, to my component here, I add asset ref to ability, the superclass ability. Let me read the code gen run here. Then if I have the system here that gets me, I can have something like, okay, what is my ability? Va ability equals f dot find asset, and then I don't need the generic, I just do filter dot kcc. It didn't finish generation. Ability, yes. Then I can call ability dot update ability, pass the frame, and pass filter dot entity, for example. This is what I was requiring. This is an interesting call because this is going to be a polymorphic call. Why? Because you don't know here from the system if this ability is either ability or a special ability that inherits from it. So you don't know if the code is going to be this code here or this code here. And basically it's data driven because when you have your entity prefab here that has a KCC, you can drag and drop here an asset, or you can spawn it with that. So when we create here the assets, so now you can either create the concrete ability or a special ability. So let's create a special ability just in case here. And then you drag and drop this guy to this particular character. And you have, this is polymorphic. And then, but, so this is kind of a complex problem because I just created very, very basic. Now I'm going to get to the two different questions. So question number one is that how do you handle data on these two different asset types? So for example, public FP cooldown, this exists in both, and public FP base damage, something like this. And then you may have this one here will have something like multiplier, which is something based on the level multiplier, damage level multiplier, something like equals 1, something like that, whatever, 1. So if you create a base ability, only has this. If you have this special ability, it's going to apply damage based on that. So let's say we have this. But the question is, you normally also have mutable data that is related to the ability. I'll just give an example. How do you create a timer for the cooldown kind of stuff? And normally the recommendation to do that is you create something like a struct ability runtime data, and let's see, frame timer cooldown, and then you can do something like, and then you do this struct union ability, I'll call it just ability data, ability runtime data, and then you can have different structs. So struct for base ability runtime data, and you can have the special ability runtime data, special, and then you can put these in the union, so they're mutually exclusive. So base, I'll just simplify the naming now, and runtime one, so special, and then you add this one here. So this is the usual stuff if you want to have different depending on the type of ability, because then when you have this kind of code here, Oh, I need to also add ability data here. Ability data, something like this. Let's call it ability data as well. And here's the cool trick. I forgot in which line, line 30. I made a mistake in line 30. Okay. It's runtime data. Runtime data. I just added the type. Taking too long on this one. This is a complex one. So this is the usual suggestion for runtime stuff, because when you're running in runtime, you can either have a base type or a special type, whatever it is, depending on what you have, and you can initialize it based on that. But what you gain with this is that when you get the data here, let's also pass here KCC because it comes as part of the KCC2D. Then I do the same here. Public unsafe as well because it's pointers. So then what you gain is when you're operating on KCC dot ability data dot runtime, you can already assume this is base because it's the base ability that is being called, so it is the base one. And here you would assume it is the special one and not the other. So the code can be very specialized. But the second part of the question was, okay, you're designing something based on this. We're designing all this based on this. So how do you actually make a character carry multiple abilities? My recommendation is really having, we can even create a special component just for that. I'll call it component abilities. I'll create it with an array, but it could be done with a dynamic list as well. But then what I would do is, so ability data. So each ability would need to have the ability itself and the ability data. I need another struct from ability. Oh yeah, ability entry. Ran out of names because I did something bad. And I add this here, and this guy would have an array of this guy. Let's say you can have up to 3 abilities. Entries. You can define how many you have assigned or not. So this is normally how I do. And let me get this run, and then this code is not running anymore. So what we would do is, I'll get here just in this example public abilities. So what I would abilities. So what I would do here is, so I would do form less than filter dot abilities dot entries dot length. So get the length of it plus plus. Then you see this code we had here. We get for each one of them here. So it's abilities entries I. So entries I dot ability. And then, yeah, I was still passing the KCC. I would pass not the KCC, but actually the ability data pointer itself instead. And then you have it having and I would do this if ability is different than null, because only if you have the abilities field this would be called. So that's how I normally allow multiple. It's essentially what you so maybe my answer should be yes, like you described, and use an inventory component and put abilities in an array like this. Yeah, that's normally how I do it personally. Let me see what else we have here. So let me show some 2D and some 3D stuff. So this demo here, I think I'm not doing anything. It's not gonna, oh, it's gonna break because my character doesn't have that component. So let's remove this part of the code for now. So I don't need this and I don't need this ability because it's my entity doesn't have this component. So I'm gonna put it to run again. So this is a 2D character controller that I've been developing for the past 1 or 2 weeks in a different context, but I'm gonna share the code for this as well. Oh, I commented the input code when I was talking to you guys. Thanks, I am quick and I remember I did this. So let me remove this that is not necessary. So this example is a 2D, very nice character controller with double jump, coyote time, wall jumps, moving platforms. So, made a mistake. Yep. So very stable moving platforms and all that. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Yeah. So disable gizmos, just the character, so it's that stable on top of the platform. You get momentum when jumping. You have jump height control by how long you press, jump multiplier. Anyway, so this is a 2D example, but can you do 3D? Of course. So let's create a simple scene here. We have some prototyping stuff that you get here. So let me create a static box collider. Call it floor. So I have here. So let's span this guy 10 by 10 on the x-axis. So this is a 3D box static collider. Now let me add a quantum 3D sphere entity that I'm gonna put here. Maybe I should make the floor larger. So 64 is a test. How is yeah, I'm seeing from here, nice. And I'm gonna get this sphere entity, and I'm also enabling not only the collider but the physics body. Just that, I just added these things. I'm not gonna do anything else. Let's see what happens if I run. So this thing moves around. So I think I don't have any bounciness on the default material, but let's check some quantum stuff. So we have quantum. I like to get the quantum shortcuts. Where is the shortcut? Find config. I know some people are already. Yeah, that one. I like to have this one always available. So what did I want to get here? Oh yeah, so default configs. I want to check my default physics material, and I want to have some restitution, 0.75. It's not bouncing. So now if I run again, and then the ball bounces around, so this is the 3D physics running. And the cool stuff is that you do it like this, and it's automatically networked physics without any bandwidth happening because of the physics. It's deterministic, so it runs exactly the same with local prediction in all of the different clients running. So it comes with both 2D and 3D physics. nav mesh, flow fields, you name all the kind of different stuff we have. You can check on our website to see all the add-ons and samples we have. But let me just add one more thing here. I'm going to duplicate this. Oh, not the sphere entity. I'm going to duplicate this floor. Put something like 8 by 8 by 0.25 or so. Let's put this guy a little bit more here and rotate it over the z-axis by -20, something like this. Let's see what happens if we run it now. And yeah, of course, this sphere is gonna bounce there, get down. We can, of course, add, and yeah, of course, you add gameplay, you add all stuff you can imagine here. Let's see what happens if we put this to run now. Yeah. And this doesn't matter, automatically networked. You can do whatever you want. We have tons of samples, as we mentioned, so so this is an interesting one that shows a third-person perspective. It's mostly for the bot SDK, but we have some interesting stuff like so this case you see here is a 3D production-ready character controller you can use that comes with a very interesting sample project with all kind of setup you want to have for character-based 3D games. But you can do car physics, everything in between, both 2D and 3D. So Niels, so on Quantum 3, it should run automatically because we detect a change on any of the QTN files. So if you can create a clean project with a specific Unity, oh, okay, thanks a lot. I don't know who answered this if it was, but I'll say I was not aware of this, that we could disable the automatic code gen. I bet this was a request by a customer because automatically running the code gen has pros and cons, of course. It means sometimes you modify a line and it forces Unity to recompile everything, and you may not want that. Okay, it's Juan. Thanks a lot, Juan. So maybe that's what you had, Neil. So I hope Juan answered your question here. So maybe you have it disabled. If you remove this, it's gonna run automatically again. So what does input mean in the Quantum 3 Unity code, question by Roberto Martinez here? If you mean this here, so this is it's basically the way we allow you to define an input struct that's going to be polled for your game and sent over the network to all of the different clients. And the reason we code generate this is also because we have these special types like button, which are very useful for you to use because they have the state machine was pressed, this was released as I demonstrated earlier. And the recommendation is always for you to use this to represent kind of a virtual controller. And then in your simulation, you use the virtual controller to have a fixed way to control the characters. Then on Unity, you can use whatever kind of input mapping on the polar to set the values of the virtual controller. And that's the way to have a decoupled system for what is the type of device people are using and having it running in multiplayer or offline single player, because Quantum also supports that. But this is just generating a struct that we can automatically serialize. Input in Quantum 3 is delta compressed. Essentially, this is all happening behind the scenes. You don't have to think too much about it, hopefully. An offset for the KCC. You mean the 3D KCC? Doesn't it already have one? Or isn't it easier to... I think it is possible. Maybe one can answer that one. I know that in this case here, on the 2D one that I'm working on, that I can share the code, but this is not the same. This is a 2D, not the 3D one. So in this, let me... So in this one here, because no, I'm not offering an offset here on this one though, but it is easy to modify the code to do it. So yeah, the advanced KCC is the one that we recommend. So that it doesn't have, we can take a note to that and add it, because it should be simple to do it. So, or maybe the guys have a different suggestion for how you handle a KCC on a VR game, because you can always do an offset in the way you handle the rest of the code, right? One, the idea is the advanced KCC. So, question by Robert. One, the question is about the advanced KCC, the new KCC, the one that you use on your even on the 3D RAID sample. That's what I understood. So it's the new this new KCC. I think this one does not have the offset. If it's not necessary to have an offset, maybe you can suggest a way to get it under the context of VR. Oh, it does have an offset. Yeah, so I don't understand what the question is, because it should have. Maybe the question is not for the quantum one, but the fusion one. Okay, thanks. So it does have an offset. Okay. So question of Martinez, VR and mobile. So yes, Quantum is a game engine that is super, super popular with mobile games. If you were not aware of it, games like Stumble Guys are done with Quantum. So it is a very, very good approach for mobile games, just like for the same reasons why it is a very good approach for WebGL games. It's because it is a serverless kind of multiplayer engine, because it is deterministic. So you don't need to have a dedicated server running the simulation. So this protects you from most types of cheating by design. And it is very, very efficient in bandwidth as well. So because it only sends input. So it's been created 7 years ago, has several games released with it, multiple mobile successes. It has multiple interesting PC games being released as well with it, but in mobile it actually shines because it is so effective and so well designed to work on the mobile and WebGL. We don't make any difference between Quantum or Fusion or other legacy SDKs, because the business model for us is always the same. It's always CCU, so we don't have any advantage of using one or the other. But it's just that Quantum works so well for these low revenue platforms, mobile and WebGL, because it is so efficient. So you don't have to pay for extra bandwidth. It always works within the expected range and all that. And it also, performance-wise, works really well under these platforms. Then the question of VR, does it work for VR? Yes, it does work for VR. We have a new... So I think we have a new, we have a new VR sample. So Quantum is very interesting for, let's say, sandbox kind of sports physics kind of stuff. Like, so you're playing ping pong, playing tennis, or punching a punch bag or something like that in multiplayer. Quantum works great with that. It's basically works out of the box. But VR has a few caveats in that it's kind of a little bit more complicated to set up. In general, the VR SDKs, and and you have to approach this in a different way because you have a different engine running the physics and all that. But we do have this sample that is very interesting, and there are some cases at which quantum would not be recommended. But if you're doing something like based on sports, perhaps, I doubt anything would be better than quantum. So maybe you should check out this XR sample. I think it is. I think this sample is free for everyone to download, if not mistaken. Not so sure. So quantum is it's a deterministic game engine, and that means you write all the gameplay in quantum itself, and it's out of the box multiplayer, networked physics and all that, but it is an ECS based game engine. It's our own ECS, can also run simulation on server and all that. Fusion is a state synchronization add-on SDK that you add to your project, and it lets you define properties in game objects you want to be synchronized over the network. Why do we have two different approaches? Because different game genres work better in different approaches of networking. So there are many game genres where determinism is the best approach. Fighting, brawlers, physics-based games, arcade-style racing games, and all that. And there are some other genres where state synchronization, especially with client-server approach, works better. And for these, normally we would recommend Fusion. It happens that these are very popular genres as well. So although in genre-wise, Quantum, I would say, covers more genres, Fusion covers very popular genres. But when you put into perspective also the platforms that you are going to run at, and the context for this Q&A was related to WebGL in particular. In that context, Quantum is a very good fit because it uses very low bandwidth, it's serverless, and you don't have and it still protects you against most types of cheating. And you may ask, why don't you run dedicated servers with Fusion, for example? That's a great solution for dedicated server deployment and so on. Because dedicated servers are more expensive to run. And normally WebGL games are on the low side of revenue per player, and running dedicated servers may be too expensive. So any solution you might find, not only ours, but any solution you see somewhere that requires you to run dedicated server somewhere, may be a little bit complicated for WebGL or mobile games because it may be too expensive to run. Then, why don't you let the player be the host? Because on WebGL, that's too dangerous, because if the guy being the host tabs out on the browser, the game slows down and basically stops working for everybody else. So player-hosted games are fine if you're talking about a Steam game or a console game or something like that, but never for mobile, never for WebGL. Mobile on WebGL, there are just two solutions that work well. One is Quantum, because it's serverless and determinism, or you can have something like shared mode Fusion, which is client authoritative, but then it's much easier to cheat. So this is why we've been recommending Quantum for this particular case of WebGL, because it is the best of both worlds. It's both serverless and protects against cheating and all that. I hope this helps understand the differences. So Chief, I'm calling you Chief. So that you have high ping, it's causing issues, you've got something wrong on your input code or on your game logic. So I'm gonna share the code for this here after the stream, and you can take a look at how the code is, how this is all done here. I think I'm gonna disable a few things to simplify what I share. But you can take a look at this one here and just run a project. I may just share a project with this and a clean one, and you can give it a go and see what happens. but it should work fine. I don't know, even 200 milliseconds ping. So something not important I could help along. That's a good suggestion, Bullis 4. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this shortcut. So let me see what you're talking about here. So when I get the default system config, when we have this and we collapse it, is that even possible that we can? Yeah, of course we can write a custom entry for this. I'm not sure if the Unity default array, because this is just using the Unity default inspector. So I'm not sure if it allows this to happen. Notice that system config in Quantum is just yet another Quantum asset. So if we're using Odin, the Odin inspector and Odin serializer, Quantum fully supports Odin. So you can have any visualization for any of these if you want to. So maybe we should have an Odin visualization for this, but I'll pass this on to the team and see what it shows here. Name me. Does it? What happens if I do this? No, it doesn't use it. Yeah. So this is just for our API itself. So interesting one. Yeah, it would be nice to have the name here. Absolutely. Oh, you were doing if input jump was released for the jump. I would use jump on was pressed, not on was released. What is time system dot time? This seems wrong. You cannot store data in systems. So I'm not sure what you're doing, but you should never store data in systems. So this code I have here does all the stuff I told you. So let me show here. Like has dashing with dash duration, dash speed, dash cooldown. Jumps include double jump timer, double jump, input buffer for when you're falling. It allows you to kind of press the jump slightly before. It also allows for some coyote time after you leave. So let me see if I can demonstrate that by playing here. So it's all here done with quantum frame timers. So you don't need to use minus plus stuff here. So I actually got it out here using coyote time and then a double jump. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I actually jump out of the platform after I left it. So this is using both double jump and coyote time. So let me see that and dash. Can I dash? Oops. Yep. So I'm gonna share this code and you can take a look at it. This code is flawless. It works all the time, and it's based on years of experience and multiple character controllers being developed both in 3D and 2D, not only by me but by our team and several of our guys who come from different studios and all. So I can share this code and you can take a look at it. Yeah, I'll forward the suggestion of the system name to the team. Yeah, when release it should lower the velocity, not gravity. Yeah. The way I do this is, so I actually do this, but the way I do is I just start applying it. So this is a full jump, short jump, short jump. So this is the shortest I can do. The only thing I'm doing at the moment is so there is a down gravity multiplier. So the base gravity is -15 and the down gravity multiplier is 3. So either if you hit apex or you release the button, it starts applying the multiplier to the gravity. But you are right that another interesting way is to cut the up velocity to even enhance this aspect of quick presses, cutting kind of the jump short. I didn't apply it here, but it's easy to do. In my code, that happens on. It's on the. I have to clean this code before I send it here. So process jump. Where's the gravity? It's not on the solver. It's on the integrate forces part. So let me show here. Flip direction multiplier. Side movement. Oh no, this is flip direction, sorry. Where's gravity here? Okay, gravity modifier, here it is. So yeah. So here I'm applying the gravity. So where do I check the button? Here, yeah. So I could use here to actually I could use this here to reduce the velocity when this was released. So just modifying the logic that's in this part here would add what you are doing, which is cutting the velocity as well. So gravity on release. Oh, it's because you were talking about doing the specific height. Got it. Yeah, yeah. It requires a little bit of modification on this code, but I honestly think this code here is really well organized for this idea as well. So it is very. I would say it's easy to understand and improve on it. So let me see what else. I don't think it's doing anything based on ping. I think you might be doing something wrong in the assumptions on the. You may be calling the code multiple. No, you're calling it from was pressed. So no, I can't say what it's happening just from what you described. It doesn't sound correct. It should not be affected by ping. So I'll show you something interesting here. So session config. So this base config here, I'm running in this case here, I'm running the simulation rate at 30 Hertz, and I'll show you some. So the base offset here means that my input offset for the local input is 0, meaning I don't have any input lag. I immediately predict with this input, and that's what I send to the server. But if your ping is above 100 milliseconds, I will start adding a little bit of input delay to the local client. So the server is not going to ignore your inputs, and everybody's still playing on the same tick. That's what we call in quantum zero lag. It's that everybody's playing on the same tick. It was a design choice we had. We're very happy with it, by the way. But you can set this to only apply after a bigger ping, but then you have to make the server wait for worst case input from other players a little bit longer. I would not recommend this. So if anything, I mean, actually I'm running at 30 Hertz. I can actually ignore the inputs from a bit earlier in that case. But at 50 milliseconds, we're not even adding inputs. So I don't know what you could be doing wrong, because running online, you are running local prediction normally, and if the input gets confirmed, fine. It should 50 milliseconds should be the same as 20, same as 0 milliseconds. It should be always accepting the input, and everything should be fine. I think it could be the timing system, yeah. Roberto, so this KCC code in particular, I'm gonna share this preview version of it both on the Crazy Games Jam Discord under the Photon multiplayer channel, and in our discords as well. It's a preliminary version for people just to try it out, but it will eventually, so it is being cleaned up and prepared to be shipped with the new version of the Blueless 2D shooter we have. But it is very cool to play with the C as it is, and I think it's fine to share. So we will share both on there. I'll just clean up some stuff that you don't need before I share it. So the KCC config code is perfectly fine. I want to do something just like, so let me try to comment some code that's not necessary. I want to comment this, so I break the code here. So I can get this. I have this code on my I don't need this. I don't need this. So to share the code, I don't need this part because it's not necessary for you to run it. So this was a second part of it. So same button, same input. I don't need this. We don't need this. Spawn clone, not needed. I have this on the REPL, so I can on player added, on added. This is for a resetting. That's okay. I'll add with multi-platform. So let me remove some of the stuff we were adding here that will not be necessary. KCC timers, query result. This is the minimal stuff for so let me see what you guys have been cooking here. Yeah. Okay, so you had problems with timekeeping then. Okay, so what is this? Okay. Okay, I forgot to do this. I'm already preparing the code to share here, by the way. So I'm just making sure. So in case it's utils, I don't need this. Reset all. I'm just deleting code that we don't need for. Yeah, this is something I added afterwards, not necessary. I think it should be still all working fine. No, it's not. I'm expecting something. Oh, yeah, I know why. Remove this component. Oh, damn. Can I remove this guy? Yeah. Yes. Now the prefab is back working. I think I don't have to. See if this is all working again. Yes, okay. Okay, double jump working, all good. So we're back at working condition, and I can actually share this whole code here. I don't need the abilities code. I don't need this, but I can share this KCC system. It's simple. The KCC utils and the KCC config. I don't need this guy, but it doesn't hurt. I was starting to implement this. It's not needed yet. Let me see if we have one more question before we finish here. Could we add in system config input the way we could have different input for different game mode? So that's a very good question, Bolets 4, but that's not how we recommend it to be done. So the way we recommend it to be done, it's actually not possible to do it that way, and the way we recommend it to be done is different, but I'll show you how you can do it. So the idea is that, again, think about the input as a virtual joystick, but you can create different structs like structs, let's say cut input, and you can think about this having a button power up and some other stuff. So it's different, and it has an FP vector to steer, something like that, whatever, or FP steer, fixed point number for steering, something like that. And then you can have a player, a character input, something like different, but I'll use the same here, character input. So you create different structs like this, and what you're gonna do is you can any of these code generated structs we have are actually partial. So you can do something like partial struct input. So the input is partial. So what you can do is you can create a cast. So how do I forgot how to do a cast. So let me grab here real quick. So cast C#. So just static implicit operator. Yeah. So for example, I can do an implicit operator for cut inputs. No, sorry. Inputs. And now let me co-generate the cart input stuff. I don't have the version for this, so but let's say I'm not gonna finish it here, but let me give an example. So var cart input equals new cart. These are always struct, so adding new here does not actually generate any garbage collection. So then you can assign cut input dots, for example, power up equals x dot jump. And you don't have to call it jump. Let's say you call it button 1, button 2, button 3. And essentially you have an operator that converts from inputs to cart inputs. And you should also do vice versa. So when polling from Unity, you can create cart input struct, and you can convert that into the virtual input stuff. So if you have, it's just a simple example, but you convert from one to the other. And what you do on the system is that if you have a cart system, when you grab the inputs, you can get like cart input k equals input. Oops. Oh, okay, sorry. content. Yes, this works. So this is doing the implicit cast. So this input type here is the quantum virtual input type, but you are automatically converting it to a cart input by your own code doing an implicit operator, implicit cast. And then you convert from the virtual to the specialized buttons. And then because you're using here cart input, you can check cart dot power up dot is pressed, is down, or was pressed, or whatever you want to call it. So you can create game mode specific input as long as it's always based on a virtual input. So our recommendation is always for you to have a fully complete virtual input system that you can use in most types of games you have. And that should work for almost everything, or essentially everything. I think we have this in our Stack Overflow that's exclusive for Circle members, so I don't think I can share a link for that one, but I hope this is easy enough to understand what I just did here. So we have a lot of stuff here, which led me to doing dumb hack. Will the assets also be shared? Not the visual assets. I cannot share this visual asset, but the KCC code, everything, yes. So switching over to the new input system, really, I honestly don't care. In production, I've used Rewire, and for me, it's really irrelevant whatever input system you're using. We have samples using the new input system. We have samples using the old input system. I'm not really developing games at the moment. If I was developing games myself, maybe I would use the new input system. Maybe I would use something like Rewired, which is what I see most customers using, honestly. But yeah. I don't know what you're saying that is fixed. No, but you are not. No, you cannot. No, you're not. The new input system does not fix this at all, because your simulation code cannot be aware of Unity. You're missing the point. Simulation code cannot be done pointing to Unity types. Why not? Because then you would never be able to run the game on the server. And that is one of the biggest features of Quantum, is that we can run hundreds of simulations of your game on servers without having to spin a Unity instance. So no, please never use the input system for that. No. The input system is for mapping different controllers into an input struct that you use in gameplay. There are three different problems at stake here. A virtual input system that's uniform everywhere, a gameplay input struct you want to use for your gameplay code to be simpler to understand, and input mapping for different controllers. Input mapping for different controllers is what Unity should solve. Period. That's all. It doesn't solve anything in multiplayer at all. Thanks, Niels. Thanks, Justin. And thanks for boilers for I don't know what you're trying to say here. Yeah, I also like Rewired, like Fox said here. But okay, in the end, the point is it's more or less irrelevant if you're using one or the other. At least it should be. And so I'm just gonna test this one more time here. I think I'm ready to share this code. Yeah, fair. I mean, you can. It's not. I'm not saying that the input system, the new input system, is bad or you should not use it. You can use it. It's fine. I'm just saying that it does not solve that particular problem at all. It solves a different problem, and it does solve it in a nice way. Yes. So I think I'm ready to share this. So I'll do this right after I finish here. I have time for one more question or something like that. So Indie Fest Spec 0, thanks for joining as well. We talked many times on our public Discord, so thanks for joining. So that's a very good question, Bowl 3EZ4. So, and the thing is, don't worry with that. Just add the 10 buttons. Why? I'm gonna tell you why. Two things. First, each button in Quantum input takes exactly 1 bit. It's not 1 byte, it's 1 bit. So if you're talking about 10 buttons for one specific game mode, it's actually going to use 10 different buttons. You're talking about that the one single game mode has to have 10 different buttons. Fine, it's fair. That's going to use 2 bytes only for the whole input struct, because it's 8 from 8 buttons plus 2 bits for the extra 2. You can actually put 16 buttons if you want, and it would still be 2 bytes over the wire times 30 milliseconds, 30 frames or 60 frames per second, let's say that. That's nothing. That's not going to take nothing. But if you're not convinced yet, it's even less, because Quantum 3 does delta compression of the input. So if you're using only 1 bit, it is delta compressing and sending only the first bytes and just the diff of that, because everything else is going to be 0. It's going to be the same as the previous input always. So from optimization perspective, just don't worry with that. You would never do this. You know what is even more interesting? Take a look at commands, because Quantum has 2 types of inputs. So far we talked only about one type, which is the runtime inputs. But we also have something called commands. So where deterministic commands here. So commands are a more interesting, flexible way for you to add special one-off stuff, like that you want to have parameters on a specific input entry, and they're also sent reliably, so they're guaranteed to reach the server unless you are disconnecting. So so take a look at the documentation for commands, because commands are normally very good for you to do stuff like, oh, I want to buy this loot, I want to respawn back, I want to go back to base or something like that. You want to guarantee certain commands to all. You don't want them to be just a button. And you ask, oh, what about prediction? Because previously in Quantum, up to Quantum 2, commands were not predicted. So they were always guaranteed to only execute after they get to the server. Now commands are predicted as well. So in Quantum 3, there's no difference between regular inputs and commands. They both are predicted. So take a look at commands, because they solve different parts of the problems. But if it turns out that you really need 10 runtime inputs, 10 runtime buttons for input, don't worry, it's delta compressed. It's not going to use more data on your game mode that only uses 1 button. That's not a problem. It's even if it was using all 10, it is fine. No, in 2.1 it is not predicted. The commands are not predicted. Input is. And also in 2.1 it's not delta compressed inputs, but it is already 1 bit per button. So 10 buttons are definitely not a problem in 2.1 either. For you to start getting bandwidth issues with inputs in Quantum, you would have to have a struct, an input struct that's taking dozens of bytes, like a few dozen bytes per struct, and you have to have a high player count for this to start to be okay. Let's start to try optimizing that. If you have a, I don't know, a game in the 20, 30 player count with a even 10 byte or 5 byte input, it's not going to be a big deal. And I'm talking 10 buttons is 2 bytes, and you still have room for 6 more buttons. So don't worry about that. So I've been streaming for almost 2 hours now. So I think I'll end up with this one. Thanks a lot, guys. This was much better than expected. A lot of very good questions. It's been a while since I've done this last time. So thanks a lot for joining. And hope I can do this soon enough again. Let's try to find a topic that makes sense for me to do something like this. So as follow-up, I'm going to share this code in a few minutes. what I mean here, I'm gonna share the QTN for this file here for all the definitions. I don't need this ability stuff that I was demonstrating. Let me delete everything I don't need and make sure I get everything still working before I share. So this one needed the other one. So let's see if it compiles now. Yeah, compiling again, all clean. Let me confirm everything is running. Yeah, cool. So I'll share this, the KCC stuff plus moving platforms. And last but not least, let's just take a look what you need to run this. So to run this character controller I'm gonna share just this code here, nothing else. I'm just gonna zip this code here and share as it is. So set up a quantum scene with 2D colliders, can be either entity. So if you see this one here is an entity, it's a quantum. Why is this thing actually? I think it has a different view. Why isn't this thing right? There's something off here because it's actually, the capsule is actually right. I'm not gonna bother with this. Yeah, the capsule is actually on the right size. Anyway, so you can either put entities. Oh, it's two of them. Yeah, that's right. It's two of them. So you can have entities, or you can have static colliders. So these, all these other here are static box colliders. So you can have either entities or static colliders. They're gonna work fine. To have a moving platform, you basically create an entity with a 2D collider and you add the moving platform component to it, and you can set the velocity, angular velocity, and how long you want to have it, or angular limits, and it's gonna do its thing as long as you have the moving platform system running. Moving platforms are optional, of course. The character itself just needs to have, it's using 2D transform. Physics collider 2D is optional. So the physics collider is only if you want other characters to not go through you, so they collide with you. So it's, if I disable the collider of the character, the KCC itself still works, but it's just worked just like before. So the KCC query is based on the KCC component itself. This one here, not the collider. But the collider is useful if you want characters to not collide with each other. But that's all you need: a transform and a KCC 2D, and assign a config, which is an instance of this config here. Play around with the settings. So I have the instance here. Play around with the settings, see what you get. I'm also gonna share this debug input here. I don't need this part. I'm gonna share this code here as well, so you can quickly get the, oh, this, no, I'm not gonna share this because it's simple enough for you to set this input here, because this is, in my case, I have a different input setup for 2 local players, so I can actually have 2 players working here with different gamepads, and that works fine. But I'm not going to share this part then. It's simple enough for you to adapt that to your own input script, your own input polar script. You mean this thing here does not work on Unity 6? Yeah, we may need to review it. It's totally optional, but I really love this thing that we added here. It's super. Okay, so thanks a lot for joining. This was great. I'm gonna share this code ASAP now. I'm just gonna zip things around and send it. And then you guys we can chat over Discord for a few more hours, and we can have troubleshoot if you cannot get this running. If you get this running, please share a few GIFs. I want to see what you guys pull off with this thing here. So thanks a lot. I'm gonna stop the stream now. So see you guys next time.